Oh, wonderful. The story that I'm going to tell is an original story that was inspired by the full moon when I was on a retreat. And I wrote it in the style of a traditional Irish folktale. There was once a young girl by the name of Lilia. She lived with her mother, father, in a village by the coast of the sea. Most of the days she spent helping her mother Mary prepare the meals and take care of the garden. But when the fish ran strong, she went to sea with her father Amos and helped pull in the knots brimming full. They worked hard, the three of them, but never on Sunday. On Sunday, they packed the boat and headed off to Seal Island. Cinnamon buns today, Mary cooed. Amos smiled. Amos rode to the special picnic spot that they loved on Seal Island, about a half a mile offshore. When the craft hit the sand, Mary jumped out of the boat and ran up the rocks and, holding the basket in her hand, said, "Come quick, or 'twill be a feast for the fairies." Lilia scrambled after her mother, Amos more slowly, but nonetheless devoted. Mary spread out her blanket on a patch of green and set out a platter of golden buns and uncorked a jug of sweet milk. Amos said, "Oh, this is the day the Lord has made," as he wrapped his sun-baked arms around the only sweetheart he had ever had. Mary's blue eyes promised a smile for later. Savoring the taste of the sweet bread and the milk, they stretched out on the rocks and watched the seals cavort from shore to sea and back again. "Look," said Mary, "the mist is thin. We can see Turtle Island." If Lilia squinted, she could see this hump that sort of in the distance was sort of vague. And she said, "Mama, does somebody really live on Turtle Island?" Ah, the innkeeper was a bitter man. One day his daughter rode out there by herself, said the wind and the sea would be kinder to her than her own father. It's been 20 years. She hasn't been seen on the homeland since. Does anybody ever see her? Hmm. People go to her. Sis said that the wind and the sea have shared their secrets with her. Have you ever gone, Mama? No, but I know some who have. And from the look in her eye, Lilia didn't ask any more questions. Amos said, "Mary, tell us a story." "Yeah, Mama. Tell us about the sea maids." So Lilia rested her head in her father's lap as Mary began. On the full moon, it's said that the sea maidens grow restless in the watery dark. The moon calls to them, and they rise. And on the rocks, bathed in her moonlight, they sing. Now there once was a young lad by the name of Paddy who had heard the legend and was determined to hear the song. Well, in her mind's eye, Lilia could see it as always. Shimmering silver tails laced over rocks, sweet voices rising. Suddenly, there was a shift in the wind. Mary grabbed up the food. Amos unmoored the boat as they climbed in. The cloud came from the north, amazingly fast, stirring the water beneath them. Mary wrapped Lilia in her shawl and put her down in the bottom of the boat. "Amos, how did we miss the signs?" I don't know, but it's getting rough. Just hang on." Amos rowed hard, but Soon he could not make any headway against the muscle of the sea. As the wind grew fierce, the rocking, rolling, tipping the boat, and the waves grew bigger and higher, and then the sea paused with a long in-breath, and Amos looked back to see the wave towering over them. God help us, he cried as the wave crashed down. Neither Lilia nor Amos remembered the journey home, and a different life began. Amos turned his back on the sea with a kind of fury and started fixing things, fixing floors and roofs and doors, fixing everything she had ever wanted fixed. Lilia prepared the meals and tended the garden, and every morning at first light, they would walk hand in hand down the beach, looking for the body. And Lilia would wait for her father's deep sigh, and then they'd turn and walk back home, swallowing their sound. The nights were endless as Lilia tossed and turned, waiting for sleep, falling in and out of restless dreams. On the night of the first full moon, she woke, startled, with moonlight filling her room, and then, sort of half dreaming, she had this vision of her mother as a sea maiden. She said, well, maybe that's why there is no body. Mama has gone to live in the sea. Maybe she will come on the first moon. And so Lilia wrapped her cloak around her and stole out of the house and sleep-walked down the beach, climbing the rocks, the one that jutted furthest out into the sea, the moonlight shining her way. And there she looked out over the water and she said, Mama, here I am, Mama. I'm here. Here I am. Here I am. And then she sat down and she waited. And she waited and waited and waited until the moon sank in the western sky. Every day she watched the moon go and come, and when it did, she was there, climbing up on the rocks. She was there. Mama, I'm here. Here I am, Mama. Half expecting, not yet disappointed. It was only one month, and then 2, 3, 4. Each month she came home quieter and quieter, and Amos did not know how to comfort her. And with each unrequited night, something inside of her tightened. On the 5th month, she walked boldly down the beach, up the rock, looked into the face of the full moon, and said, It's not true. You bring me nothing. And on the 6th night, she did not go. She closed the shutters against the light. And so it was from then on. She went into her bedroom and she picked up her mother's things. The quilt that covered the bed, the shawl that hung on the chair, the needlework that softened the walls. She put them in a trunk and she took them outside to a shed. And she came back in and she said to her father, She's dead. And the girl grew smart and strong, took up the hammer beside her father. Together they built houses and sheds and boats. At 13, the moon pulled on her in another way. The unfamiliar pain was hard and lonely. Amos did not notice the changes in her, but Malachi did. Malachi, the wiry boy with the mane of red hair that used to trot laughingly beside her down the road to school. Malachi noticed. And over the years, she turned into curves, and his wiry body thickened into muscles. He was the son of a fisherman. His joy was riding the waves and capturing its bounty. But at 18, his eye was roaming the land more and more and more. They settled on Lil Ority, black hair tied back in a bun, slender legs. He gazed at the curve of her neck and the firmness of her breast, and he found himself wondering what her hair looked like if she let it down. Lilia felt his gaze and turned away. But fishing had taught Malachi Brady to be patient and persistent. One day, a bunch of daisies brought to her door. Another day, a fresh fish that her father might enjoy. One Sunday, he knocked on the door with a pail and shovel and said, "I'll dig a whole bucket full of clams for you, Lil, if you keep me company." Amos cheered and literally shoved her out the door. From that day on, every Sunday, he'd snatch her up and they'd go off and they'd hike in the hills, pick blackberries, talk. One day they were sitting on a rock and he ran his finger over her temple and said, "Lil, I'd like to see your hair down." "Will you let it down?" I, I, I don't wear it that way." "I know, but I'd like to see it down. Would you let it down for me?" And she raised a nervous hand and undid her hair, and it fell in slippery black ends. He gasped, and she felt herself soften to his touch. And then she sat up and tied her hair back in a knot and said, I have to leave." "Oh, what's wrong?" I can't. I just can't, Mac." And she ran down the beach, and Amos watched as she tore through the house and slammed the door to her room. That night, the earth's shadow ached. Lilia watched from her bedroom window as the moon completely disappeared. Terror gnawed at her, and in the dim glow of its rebirth, she saw the shape of an island. There is an island that rises like a turtle's back, where a woman lives who knows secrets. She sat up, remembering her mother's story. The next morning, she packed her bags. "Lil, where are you going?" Amos asked. "To Turtle Island." "Ah," he nodded, and he walked with her down to the boathouse. He pulled out a seaworthy craft, one that he has been meticulously working on for years. And together they carried it to the water and placed it in. Oh, wait, he said, I'll be back." And he returned. He returned with shirts and food and jugs of water. And she said, Dad, no." Tears rose in his eyes as he said, "I'm so sorry." And her heart froze, refusing to go. But then she turned her back and climbed into the boat, and Amos watched as her strong arms carried her out beyond the breaking waves. She had not been on the open sea for 10 years, and yet it was like every muscle of her body remembered the moves. It was dip, dip, and pull. Soon the land disappeared, and there was nothing but water. Terror seized her, but still she rode on. She thought, Mother said it had been 20 years, and that was 10 years since. I mean, it's just a foolish journey. I mean, could she still be there? But she rode on, and the sun was hot. She had shirts and water, and plenty of water. And she rode on to Turtle Island. The rocks were covered with moss and dense seaweed, and the churning waters as she got closer and closer to the island. She looked and she saw that there was a small sand beach just at the bottom of the wall that rose like a fortress. And there was a boat tied in there. People come. People come. She saw an opening in the rock and a warm path. Yes, she secured her boat and she tied her pack around her and she began to climb. It was like, where? All she saw was um, rocks and little bushes and birds. But no, there, a stone building. And she grew closer. Someone is here. She saw a smoke rising from a chimney from the thatched roof, and there was a pile of driftwood, and there was fish nets hung to dry. You must be here. She must be here. Hello? Is anybody here? A woman's body rounded the corner of the house. Lilia turned around to see a round body on short, stocky legs that had her skirts tied up and a hoe in her hand. You're alive. Well, are you sure about that, girl? Because if I'm not alive, you're in big trouble. Oh, it's just that I was so worried. I didn't. Worry is the devil's noose. My name is Mara. Well, I'd come because people, there's plenty of time for that, lass. You must be starving. And Mara pulled back the oiled cover that covered the opening to the house and led Lily inside to a room that was pungent with the smells of fish, seaweed, and fire. There were two rocks around a slab of a table, and there was an iron pot hung over the fire. The woman scooped up a big bowl of broth steaming with fish. Lilia realized that she was famished and ate. Then, when the meal was done and rest taken, they went outside. Mara showed how she opened the soil and laid the seed. She said, oh, the rocks keep many away, but good fortune is mine because I have a lass here with a strong back who's willing to help plant. And Lily fell into the rhythm of the planting. And so they worked together side by side, the woman cursing the stones and talking to the birds as the western sky flared with a red rinse and the moon started its journey in the east. Lilia slept on hides and blankets, and the days grew and turned into weeks. And each morning it was like she remembered a comfort that she had long forgotten. And each morning she would climb the spongy knolls filled with heather and up to the rock basins where the rainwater was. And then she'd fill 2 jars with some fresh water and walk back with a pole, 2 jugs hanging over her shoulders. It was the last day of the 4th week when Mara sat gazing into the fire when Lilia returned with the water. Well, you came for a reason, lass, not just to keep me company. It's time. She reached up and took a satchel off the wall and said, "Come." And she led Lilia to a cave on the far side of the island, where wood for a fire had been prepared. Blankets lay on the ground. She opened the satchel and with oil and wick and lit the fire and placed two small jars on the ground. As I said, "What are we doing?" "Yeah. Lass, have you ever had an infection under your skin?" Lilia nodded. "And did your father ever put a warm compress on it to draw the infection out?" Lilia nodded. "That's what we're doing." "I don't understand." "You will." And Mara sank down along the cave wall and rested her eyes on Lilia with great confidence. Lilia sat, looking into the fire, and slowly, slowly, the wave came, powerful, strong, and she saw what she did not see when she was 8, as if eyes in the back of her head had recorded it. She saw her mother tie her to the bottom of the boat. She saw her father bailing furiously. She saw the wave crash down, taking her mother. Crash, taking her mother. Crash and crash, and the roar of the wave echoed against the walls of the cave, and she realized the roar was her. And then the tears came and subsided, came and subsided, came and subsided. And every time they grew less and less. And the woman gave her water with tinctures. And day turned into night. And Lilia, exhausted, lay down on the blankets and closed her eyes. And Mara stroked her forehead as she slept more deeply than she had slept in years. She did not know the time when Mara shook her awake and said, "Like, where are we going?" "To look at the moon." "No, I don't want, no, I don't want to. I know, but you must." And Mara took her hand and led her out of the cave. Lilia resisting, not wanting, feeling agitated, Mara led her up over the spongy knolls of heather up onto the rocks. Lilia, resistant, took her out into the rocks that jutted out furthest over the sea. The moon was a silver orb in the sky. Mara sat down, looked up, face full into the full moon, and began to sing. Lilia looked everywhere except the moon, but the moon was everywhere and caught her with its reflection in the water. Lilia stared into the water, watching the moon dancing there, so soft, so inviting, listening to that song. And then she would look at the woman and back at the water, look up at Mara, back at the water, until she finally was able to follow Mara's eyes back, looking into the face of the full moon once again. And joy filled her, all the empty places. And now she understood. And the tears flew again, the tears came again, but this time not from pain. Mara's smile was radiant. She said, "Our bodies are children of the flesh, but our souls are children of a much greater mother. And with that, Lilia could not take her eyes off the moon. And so they sat side by side as she traveled across the sky. They walked home, and for a few days they talked about it, but few words were necessary. And they waited again one full turn of the moon as they went from dwelling to cave to rock to garden, talking and laughing. And one calm night, they walked back down to the sand beach at the base of the island. Mars said, "Oh, girl, oh, your father and your man are going to be looking for you." Tears came to Lilia's eyes as she got watery, and Mars said, "Oh, don't worry about me, lass. You know, I've got plenty of fish that are smoked and set by, and enough potatoes and turnips to last me the entire winter." They hugged for a long time. And then Lillian stepped into the boat and began to row. The moon a halo behind her, giving her a silver path, guiding her way back home to Malachi and Amos. And a new life began.